9/11. And he had a conversation with Tony Blair. And during that conversation, the Prime Minister and President Wahid, the leader of the world's largest group of Muslims, 218 million Muslims, who was also an Islamic scholar, and he taught in a Christian Catholic Jesuit seminary, so he was an interfaith man personified. Yes. He said, we as politicians internationally should take faith much more seriously. And when he left and we waved him off from the door of number 10, Tony Blair turned to me and said, John, I think we have to take faith and state matters much more seriously, don't you? And then I wrote a paper for him on why we should. And that's why he asked me to take on these responsibilities.
And how has things moved on from there? How do you think your appointment as Special Envoy on interfaith has enabled communities to come together in Britain?
There are now 350 councils of faith in every local authority. Two things had to happen. The government has to open its doors to people of faith. If you were in a faith community, Muslim, in my own city, if you were a Hindu or even a Methodist, you couldn't change your chapel or hall into community facilities and get a grant because you were seen as religious. Well, we've changed it. The rules to the local authorities say open the doors, make them welcome and work with, partner with faith communities. That's happened. There are 350 interfaith community groups within all the towns and cities of Britain. And I think so, nudging people together, and I've gone to say now in the last few years, we've got to get beyond just sitting down for cups of tea and samosas. We've actually to deepen the conversation, and that's the top priority. And the second priority is to engage young people. Cut it out for the over 60s and engage the under 25s. Engage young people in our towns.
And how do you engage young people? Because the young people, obviously, watching the media, looking at combat forces attacking places like Iraq, and of course when Israel attacks Lebanon, many the delay to call the ceasefire on the part of not just the American but also the British government does play a role in the way they perceive their government doing things for the Muslims around the world.
Of course it does. Of course it does. And
do you then recommend to the Prime Minister, as in your capacity as an envoy, to look into that aspect too?
I think he got quite a strong conversation with him when I told him I wasn't supporting him going into Iraq, so he knew where I stood then, and we had a difference of view on that. I set out my view. I think I was right in retrospect, but that's history. But I would say there are other factors as well. Young Muslim lads in my constituency stand around on the street corner and say, my granddad came and worked in the mills. My father then came and had a shop. And now my father's brother runs the taxis, and I might go to the taxis. Well, no, I want more out of life. And I can't go downtown to Leeds, which is a thriving city, because I can't take part in binge drinking and the nightlife and clubbing. So what am I doing instead? I'm dealing in cocaine. And I have to say, we've got to go somewhere else. So we've got to work with young people, engage them. But their only agenda isn't international affairs. There are home issues to tackle as well. And if people are feeling completely disaffected from the society, so what do? Interestingly, I went and met some young Jewish people in a very, I would say, a more affluent part of my city, and they told me the same story. Binge drinking and downtown night clubbing isn't for us. We want a different vision for the city. So can we get the youngsters together to compare notes of what kind of a city they want for the future and get them to start being part of designing it for themselves, to say what their culture should be like in our city?
Engaging with the young people, of course, is something that is to be encouraged, not just within England but around the world too, because young people represent the future and how a future will emerge for a country. We are talking today to John Battle, MP. He's the Special Envoy of Prime Minister Tony Blair on interfaith matters. Has also been a Foreign Office Minister. We'll take a short break, and when we come back, we'll continue our discussions with the Right Honourable John Battle, MP. Welcome back, viewers, to Insight with Javed Malik. Today we are talking to the Right Honourable John Battle, Member of Parliament. He is a Special Envoy of the Prime Minister, British Prime Minister Tony Blair, on interfaith matters. We've talked about some of the domestic issues. John, one of the things that I wanted to ask you, of course, is this perception that, the Chief of the Army as well said that, it's time to pull out of Iraq. Do you think we are a pull out from Iraq in the next year or so is likely, and whether or not this war on Iraq has what has it given to the people of Iraq?
Well, I didn't support it in the first place, so I'm not sure how you go into a place and sort it out with violence. I tend to be, despite my name, Battle, a man of peace, so I'm against all wars on all circumstances. Right. So I'm actually non-interventionist in a strong way, but we have intervened in the past. I think I voted
Where
against...
is the way out now?
Well, I think the way out, I'm not sure. I tend to think, look at Northern Ireland. The way out in Northern Ireland, I was intimately involved in, my wife's from Northern Ireland for 30 years. At the end of the day, after all the bombing and bullets, you have to sit around the table. And I used to say in Northern Ireland, even if you talk about, the classic British thing, even if you talk about the weather, sit down and talk, don't shoot each other. So I think you've got to find some middle ground. But if the armies are in the way for that conversation,
how do you respond to
then
the statements that come out of America, George W. Bush? It doesn't seem to be in the mood to talk, does he?
No,
I mean, he's more of a person who's perceived to, push his way through rather than talking.
I think he's had that view all the way through. It's not one that I've supported, but I do think that there needs to be a different view in America. But unfortunately, I'm a voter in Leeds, and my constituency in Leeds, and I don't have a vote in the US of A, but would encourage other people perhaps to vote differently.
But your vote obviously has an influence in British Parliament, and that is headed by Tony Blair, who happens to be saying that he's shoulder to shoulder with George W. Bush. But, I mean, where do you think this shoulder to shoulder journey is going to end? Because, of course, British have always known for trying to resolve matters by dialogue, like the example of Northern Ireland.
Yeah, well, I think that was the tragedy, in a way, that George Bush was calling the shots in Iraq. He and his generals, they're a bigger army, they're a bigger force, and I think the whole world needs to note that, actually. And I'm not sure how much American policy will change in the future, because America is a huge, huge power now on its own, without any restraints around the world. Maybe China in the future, and that might not look as pretty and easy as people think. It won't just be trade relations. There could be some real challenges and violence around that edge as well. So I fear for the future, because we're dealing with big powers. Britain's a smaller player and should accept that its military role is much smaller now. Its economic power, of course, is big. It's fourth economy in the world, third economy, fourth biggest, and the rest of it. But in terms of military might and size, we're not the biggest player. But what we may have skills at and should go back to is negotiation, and back off this idea that we can sort the world out by force.
Now, you've seen, of course, Tony Blair going through challenge after challenge in his leadership, but surviving. People have called him a survivor too. You're close to him as envoy. We are expected that in the next May or June that he may be stepping down. Yeah. Do you think there is a likelihood of Tony Blair stepping down?
I think there is a real likelihood, because he said he will. He's announced it. He said he won't be at the next party conference, which isn't that many months away now. That's in September. He's hardly going to say, I'm going in August, when everyone's away and won't notice. So it's likely to be, I think, May, June, when he will stand aside. Then there'll be a leadership election in the Labour Party, which is the normal way to do it. In the past, MPs have just chosen whoever they want to be the Prime Minister, a small band of them, or in the Conservative Party, it's just been...
You're talking about, of course, one member, one vote.
Yeah, so it goes to the whole party. Whether anyone puts their name forward to challenge Gordon Brown remains to be seen. There's plenty of speculation running about.
British political history tells us that, we've had a similar, somewhat similar situation thereby with Thatcher, where you had Michael Heseltine as a front runner, later obviously overtaken by somebody completely less known. Do you think David Miliband would be perhaps creeping in and not really Gordon Brown, who's always been dubbed as a likely successor?
Mrs. Thatcher, if I remember rightly, was replaced by John Major after a great slog out with Heseltine.
Absolutely.
Let me say to you, Gordon Brown is no John Major. I mean, the way that he's managed the economy, compared with John Major when he was managing the economy badly.
Do you think someone else might sneak in?
I don't
obviously
think so.
There is
No.
Gordon Brown is a likely successor. Everybody seems to be in agreement on it. He's done a wonderful job with the economy. Everybody supports that.
I think what Gordon Brown's to do is...
But some people say that he may be an old face. People may want change. In order for you to challenge the charisma of David Cameron, you need a fresh, young face.
Well, the television always likes new faces, doesn't it? That's it. So what's yours is what I'm tempted to say. You might not be there as long as you think. That applies to all of us. But what I say in response to that is, I think the strategy isn't just to find a new face, it's to get a new team and new ideas, actually. I think we have got to be careful that we don't burn out. To win 4 times would be a massive, massive achievement. But you have to have new ideas to face the new challenges.
But you think you'll be able to face the conservative, the sort of emerging conservative popularity under David Cameron?
I'm not meeting that popularity. Try the north of England. We had a swing to Labour in my seat at the last election. No, and mine wasn't a
Very few of those seats might have been like that,
Yeah,
but
mine
there's
was-
a large number of seats that have gone the other way.
No, but mine was a Liberal Democrat seat. Now, I've had to win it. I've never had a safe Labour seat. But in the north of England, for example, the Conservatives are making no impression at all. So the noise is coming from the south, west, south